Hi, my name is Maya. Today we're going to review Nicole Maines' new biography, It Gets Better, Except When It Gets Worse. This is a memoir / book of advice by Nicole Maines, a trans activist, award-winning actress. I love this book and I want to share 10 things it inspired or I learned from it. The first thing I learned was something that should have been obvious. It's okay to come out whenever you're ready. My experience and the experience of the trans people around me have been many coming out around the pandemic like me, and reading her book and reading about her childhood was, I would say, the most exposure I'd gotten to what it must be like to be trans when you're a kid and how important it is for kids to have this space to be themselves, whether it's socially transitioning, taking blockers. I really didn't get it when I first came out. So when I first came out, people seemed more comfortable with it because I was an adult. I was like 22 and they're like, okay, you're over 18, you can make your own decisions. If you want to take hormones, it's up to you. They had a different respect because it was okay that I was trans because I was old enough. This book painted a beautiful picture of what it was like growing up as trans, being in a little body where not everything was right and being able to express that self. Nicole took time to share about her parents and her brother, and it was beautiful, and I guess I almost had a longing. Oh, what if I'd come out sooner? Which, everyone comes out in good time. But it was really beautiful to experience and see that. So that's the first lesson. Come out whenever you're ready, even if that's when you're 6 years old. Lawmakers shouldn't be going after trans children. They're going after trans kids. And even if you believe that trans kids shouldn't have hormones or blockers or be able to socially transition, the crusade against trans people isn't a gentle one that is there for children. If people cared about children, they'd make stricter gun laws. No, the crusade starts with kids. They're defenseless. They have less rights. And then it keeps going and going until trans rights for adults are taken away. So you have to start by protecting the kids. So that's the first lesson. Lesson number 2 was on The Little Mermaid. She brings it up as a trans allegory, and I hadn't really thought about it before. Nicole talks about how The Little Mermaid wants to escape a world and enter a new one. She touches on beauty standards and the original story, which is a lot more horrible than the Disney version. I wasn't obsessed with Disney princesses, probably because by the time I was 6, we stopped having a TV in the home and saw Disney as this consumerist evil thing, and I grew very sheltered. I didn't have Barbies, not because they were girly, but because they were plastic. But I did have lots of stuffed toys, including my favorite, Lammy. Lamb was a lamb, so she was a she, so I would live vicariously through this feminine toy. So I had my own version of femininity in play, but I guess that's a different story. Get back to the book, Little Mermaid's escape to a different world, and how no one understands it. The line I connected to, which she brought up later and tied to that allegory of a mermaid wanting to have legs, live a different life, to get rid of her fishness. Nicole talks about this longing to be somewhere different, no matter what the cost, no matter what it hurts. And there's this line that really stuck out to me, which was, be lovable or die. You have to be this perfect, pretty version of woman. And there's definitely a lot of pressure for trans women to be a certain way. I think more and more things are changing and trans people are able to be more plural, I guess. There's a great acceptance for plurality and different shades along the gender spectrum. When I was non-binary, I felt like the world didn't understand me as well. When I came to understand myself as trans woman, it was a bit of a relief and comfort, and I think the people around me maybe found that easier to understand. There's a bigger understanding of binary trans people. There definitely was that sort of be pretty or die thing that I feel sometimes. I don't think everyone has to do it. I've come to understand that. Her noting the similarities between The Little Mermaid and a trans person giving up their life and re-finding themselves so that they can walk on land with all the other girls. So I don't know what the lesson is there, that we shouldn't have to be pretty or die. Everyone should be allowed to be however they are. The Little Mermaid suffered. Let's create a world where we don't have to. The third lesson from the book was about trans representation in media. Nicole has a lot of experience with this. She was in Dreamer. I wrote the comic for it. You can check out that video over here. I fell into the trap a lot of people, I think, might, where I feel like trans representation has to be perfect and good, and there's been a lot of really bad trans representation. Now, I mean good and bad in the sense of well executed, but also like they're not the villain. And Nicole shared about how this need to be perfect, quote unquote, like morally good, well-crafted, I guess pretty, like we talked about with the mermaid thing. It wasn't really honest. She talked about, spoilers if you haven't seen Dreamer, but there's an episode where they really dive into trans rights, and she writes about how it would have been more interesting if her character did what she almost did in the episode, which was kill this transphobic man. who was a horrible person. And, you know, the gray area of when is murder okay would be more human and more interesting. As often as media has demonized trans people and made us villains, honestly, even Latin Americans in general are made villains, queer people are made villains, trans women are made villains. It's good to overcorrect, and I think we need stories like Dreadnought where a trans woman is a superwoman, trans superwoman. Just as it's important to have those corrective, wholesome, good roles, Nicole advocates for the role all humans really deserve, which is a messy human. This person has difficulty with shit just like you do. And it made me reflect and think about how I approach my writing. I like writing stories. She made me rethink how I approach trans representation and the fact that it should be messy and gray and nuanced and difficult and beautiful and ugly and contradictory, just as humans are, is important. So thank you. I think I'm gonna think of how I write trans characters differently, and I think it's okay for trans people to be nuanced and complicated and human. So that's the third lesson. Let's go on to the fourth. The fourth lesson is something I've wrestled with a lot, and I want to make a video more about it. It might take some time to figure out where I want to approach it, but the fourth lesson is about where transphobia comes from. And what I learned from that was she sees transphobia as coming from a place of fear, which makes sense to me. I think the time I've been scared the most is when a man looked at me in fear, way before I transitioned, because fear can turn to anger and anger can turn to violence. I ran away and nothing happened, but it was still scary. I think transphobia does come from fear, and her take is that trans people defy one of the most basic tenets of our modern society of what gender is and what sex is and what the role of gender is and who gets to be what gender. She posits that closed-minded cis people might see a trans person change their gender, and that makes them scared because if gender is finite, so is everything. And yeah, I think it makes sense that that's scary, and I wish people wouldn't be afraid. I think everything is malleable. We can all change. Sexuality changes, gender changes, and I would hope that people look at change with love and acceptance and not fear. And it doesn't make me be okay with transphobia. Maybe my videos or seeing other trans people out there or reading books like this one can help people understand that there's nothing to be afraid of, and you should see change as a good thing, even if it means that change in you is possible. And I think that's where the most hateful people come from. There, a lot of transphobic people maybe have some discomfort with their own gender, and it's either to lash out than confront whatever that is. And seeing someone live truly free, I guess, scares some people. Ultimately, people are afraid of the freedom that trans people show. Next lesson, it was a reminder that there's no such thing as a gender police, and everyone should be allowed to express their gender however they want. I think sometimes I would get caught up in an idea of how much effort it takes to be a trans woman and all the work it takes, get resentful of people who were able to express their gender without doing the same work I was. And the fifth lesson is just a reminder that everyone expresses gender their own way and no one's a gender police, and we should all celebrate each other. Even if you're not on hormones, you're still trans. Even if you don't change your pronouns, you're still trans. I was non-binary, he, him, for like a year. And once you've moved past the discomfort of changing your pronouns, it's really easy to look at people who are still earlier or in a different place than you and look at them with judgment. But this part of the book was a reminder that there's no place for judgment, and there should only be place for love and acceptance of everyone who is on their journey in their own way. So yeah, everyone gets to be trans however they want to, of course. Just how I was allowed to explore gender in my own slow, unique way. Everyone deserves that same courtesy and respect on their own journey. Lesson 6. Being trans is magical. It's magical for many reasons, but the reason I'm sharing now is a fact that I've noted, but it was nice to see it put in book form, plainly and succinctly and well written, which is trans people are magical because we are forced to look at ourselves in a deep and personal way, in the way cis people just don't. But when you're trans, it's a deeper, it's like taking out this plant, uprooting it, digging all the dirt out and planting a new seed, not just tending it differently. It's a huge world shift, and it's something that most trans people do, and it's magical because you walk through the world having done more self-reflection than some people might ever do, and that makes you approach your whole life differently. And I think that can be really beneficial and helpful and beautiful, because so often our society doesn't push us to examine ourselves, and trans people, we don't really have a choice. So there's something really magical about self-examination and self-reflection, and I think it's beautiful. And I'm very lucky that I got to do this, and when I meet other trans people who have done this self-reflection and really worked out what it means to be them, it's easy to connect on a really deep level, and that's pretty freaking cool. So that's that lesson. The next lesson is stop threatening us. I want to read an excerpt. I'm pretty young, but I'm old enough to recognize that our carbon emissions are a problem. Maybe we should turn towards renewable energy sources. It's pretty obvious that what we're doing isn't working. I don't understand why our country feels like we have the time and attention to waste on climate change deniers. Was summer this hot when you were a kid 80 years ago, dummies? Whatever we do, it has to be sustainable, because we're in a long-haul emergency. These fools should really consider doing their jobs, or else people like me actually will start running for office. Well, probably not me. I won't win. I say fuck a lot. But do you have any idea how pissed off my generation is? And how queer? And how good we are at mass communication? Soon enough, they're really going to see what the gay agenda looks like. Up until now, some of us have been very content just to sit in our little corner of West Hollywood and do our thing. But now that they're continuing to legislate against our existence, bitch, do not make us fucking take political power. I think it was a good reminder. Most people in Congress are really, really old, and it's not going to be that way forever. And a day of reckoning will come. And I don't mean violent. I just mean that things will inevitably change. You can't keep stepping on people and expect them not to fight back. I think the zeitgeist that I move in, the cultural norm I move in, is very much one of, I'll just hang out with the people that I care about. And for a while I thought, oh, it's important to reach across the aisle and try to get to know other people and take the high road. But at some point you have to say, stop threatening us. It's really messed up, and the problem is so overwhelming. It's sometimes easier just to shut it down to the point that you forget to get mad. But it's okay to say, hey, stop it. Stop making laws against me. It's not okay. The next lesson ties really into this, so I'll stay in the same spot. That would be lesson number 8. Insofar as being pretty and nice and polite, and I'm in California, Northern California, a place where people kind of apologize because they were hypothetically going to bump into each other. And we all live in bubbles of people who think like us. In this pushing down how overwhelming it is and how hard it is, there's so many laws against us, I kind of just became numb about it. And I forgot that I also have to remember to be angry. And it's okay to be angry and sad about it. Eventually, people from my generation will start running and will start winning. And I think there'll be changes even before then. I'm not saying running for office is the best way to change things. We saw a trans person get political power recently and not have much power against stopping those who wanted to stop her. One day there'll be a coalition of trans women and trans men in Congress, and I hope we won't get pushed around so much. But Nicole reminds me to be mad. There's a line I'm paraphrasing, but it was, all those people who hate trans people, guess what? We hate you too. We hate you. And I think for a long time I tried to operate in this realm of understanding, where does hate come from? I tried to intellectualize why people would feel this way and tried to show myself as an example of, someone who could slowly change hearts and minds. But over and over, day in and day out, there's more and more legislation against us. So at some point you have to say, no, I hate you too. Fuck you. Shut up. Sit down. Don't leave your house. It's okay to be angry. I think it's easy to be numb about it. And this was a good reminder. To all the people that give me hate comments, I delete them immediately. I'm never going to be one of those people who highlights a hate comment and then shows why that person is so silly. They'll just be deleted immediately and you'll be blocked. I hate you, so you're not going to have a voice on this channel. And thank you, Nicole, for reminding me to stand up and fight back, even in my own small way. The next lesson is to be authentic. I'm pretty good at being authentic. I think sometimes I lose my way, like what I talked about, sometimes being judgy of how other people express their gender. I've learned to let go of that. I think sometimes I can be trying really hard to be really good, strong, and be an example to other trans people. But this was just a reminder to be authentic. And I do a pretty good job, but Nicole's book felt like a conversation. And I think that's how a memoir should be. I really loved reading her words and hearing her wisdom. Even though we're at the same age, I thought it was cool. Just a reminder to be yourself. That's the most important thing. And the last lesson is the title of the book. It gets worse, except when it gets better. Overall, I love the authenticity, the rawness. She even talks about how her depression made it hard to write the book. And being trans and coming out has made life better in innumerable ways. But sometimes I also get depressed and I also have anxiety. And I haven't been the star of some big TV show. I didn't help pass the first pro-trans bathroom legislation. I'm not an activist on the scale that Nicole is, but it was warm and comforting to see her own vulnerability and her own difficulty with depression. Life flows up and down, but it's okay. And I really appreciate hearing that from someone who I've come to admire through her comic book writing, her memoir, her movies, her shows. It's cool. I think I connect with her because we're both trans women. We were born the same year. We're from the same country. Obviously, I don't know her, but it's cool to be able to interact with the art and thoughts of someone who I have a fair amount in common with. Some of the other memoirs I've read, Candy Darling lived years ago. A lot of them were older than me and didn't live in the world I live in, or have come to live in it but didn't grow up in it. And it's really cool to have her share. I think some people might have waited longer to give a memoir. It's usually something people do at the end of their life. I'm glad she did it now. It's nice for her to share and be able to find kingship and just relate to someone. It's really cool. Those are the lessons I learned from this book. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll see you very soon.